Once you're in Microsoft, there is a lot of lateral movement in terms of job roles. So, my advice would be there are essentially two ways that companies can grow, right? You can either go and purchase another company or...
So hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Boardroom. Joining us today is Rowan Williams from all the way to London, who is the Managing Director of Masters in Marketing, also known as MIM. How are you feeling, Rowan?
I'm feeling great, Ritesh. Fantastic. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Roman, for attending this interview. So I'll be shooting some of the questions and I hope like the audience and we can have a very good interaction here. So the first question, let's start with the first question without wasting any time. So Rowan, I have seen your profile earlier. When I was doing my research, I found out that you are into this industry for the last 7 years now, 7 years. And you have worked with Microsoft and other big giants. But then you shifted to MIM as a managing director. So my first question, how is the change in the experience? Like you have worked with Microsoft and every other giants. So what is the difference between the work culture there and the work culture right now?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question to touch on. I think the main thing is when shifting from a large corporation where, there are 5,000 plus employees, usually you have a very set schedule of tasks and remit of work that you have to do. I think when you're in a smaller organization like MIM, you end up wearing a lot of different hats, especially, as you become more senior within the organization. So I think that's the first thing. You have to understand that the work culture is slightly different because you have more to do. You can't just blend in and do your job. There is, if you don't do your work, it gets picked up by the rest of the organization and the results start to show. So yeah, I think really interesting question to start with and very interesting answer, hopefully, to start with as well.
Like you are holding a senior position right now, there must be a lot of juniors who looks at you like as an inspiration or as a benchmark. So is there any pressure or something to have to live to the expectations and everything when your juniors are watching and the other people?
Yeah, I think there's a tremendous amount of pressure. People in the managing director role often have two parts to their job. The first part is actually making sure that the day-to-day running of the business and the service that we're providing is all up to scratch. And then on the flip side, you wear a completely different hat for the rest of the time where you have to look at the financials of the business. You have to look at the strategy of the business. Are we targeting the right customers? Are we targeting the right industries? Have we got the best products? Dealing with customer issues, whether they're unhappy, which in our case is rare, or are those customers going outside of the scope of their retainer? So you end up wearing a lot of different hats, but generally you wear two. One is you become a trusted advisor to the rest of your business, making sure that the customers are getting everything that they need to succeed. And the other part is making sure you run the business. So the finance side of everything, making sure the strategy is in place. So yeah, definitely quite stressful at times, but I think you have to go into it with a mentality of you will work probably a lot harder than you did at a big corporate, but at the same time, the rewards are there if you do that, because as a managing director, you are ultimately responsible for the growth of the business, but also those rewards come back to you a lot bigger. So, for example, in a big corporate, if you do well, you may get a quarterly bonus of 2.5 or 5% or a 10% annual bonus. But even if you've gone above and beyond, that doesn't really change. Whereas if you work long hours, if you put in the time and you do your research and you learn and do that continuous learning as a managing director role, the rewards quite often are a lot bigger because it's linked with the performance of the business. So the rewards are there, but you have to go into it with the right mentality.
Amazing. So I would like to know your journey first, but there's one question that I want to know. Like you started from a particular position in a company when you started into this industry, when you dived into this industry, then gradually you see yourself in different companies, different position, and then you got the position of managing director. So I want to know how you were as an employee for different companies. What was your mindset? And what was that mindset that led you to this amazing journey of this so much of success or whatever you have seen? What are the paths that took you to the managing director position?
My journey started. So when I finished my undergrad, I went straight into the telecoms industry, working for Virgin Media, and worked there for a couple of years. I was actually in IT security before I was in marketing, and that gave me a really good base understanding of IT security and IT in general. From there, I decided to have a change of career at 23, 24. And decided to do my postgrad. And that's where the idea of Masters in Marketing came about. So I was studying Marketing and International Management at Henley Business School. After that, went back into telecoms as a kind of a junior marketing role, and then moved across to Microsoft, where I was the UK go-to-market manager for manufacturing. So I would work with all the different parts of Microsoft and take their products to the UK market. So, excuse me, that was a really exciting role that I worked in. From there, I went across to Hitachi. Obviously, Hitachi is a huge company. They've got over 900 constituent parts of their business. I worked in the IT part, so Hitachi Consulting and Hitachi Vantara, where essentially I did the same thing, but on a slightly bigger scope. So looking after Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And that was really interesting. The thing with that is, going back to your original question, I had a very set scope of what my role was. My role was to support the manufacturing industry and the financial services industry and taking their products to those industries. But when we flipped out, so during the pandemic, I got made redundant from my role. I then decided to relaunch MIM as a brand, and just started myself in my room at home. And with the support of my wife, I managed to sell the idea of fully outsourced marketing. But a lot of that was informed by the experiences that I had at a big corporate. So when you're at a big corporate, because they function in some ways very well, but in other ways very badly. But if you take the positives from those big corporations, they have to put things in place that allow them to scale, right? So, we had an EMEA team, we had an Americas team, we had an Asia team, and each one of those teams were standalone units with some crossover. So, for example, you would have a marketing manager that looked after EMEA for manufacturing, you'd have a marketing manager that looked after manufacturing for Americas, and the same for Asia. But underpinning all of that, you had a delivery function, so content writers, graphic designers, and that delivery function that actually you could brief your work into, and they could give you and deliver that work back to you so that you could take it to market, essentially. So a lot of those principles and processes that were in place at a big corporate allows me at a small scale to be able to implement those and essentially build a scalable business. Now, what does that mean for a small business? So I started by myself. After 6 months, two of my friends, well, one friend and one ex-colleague from Hitachi joined me, so Claire and Cindy. And then from there, we created a pod system. So this pod system essentially allows you to have 2 marketing managers which look after 5 clients or 4 clients, depending on how big those clients are. But then sitting underneath that, we hired a content writer first and then a graphic designer. So now all of a sudden we have Claire and I in a pod and Cindy in a pod, but then we have a delivery function that we can brief work into centrally that manages all that workload and then passes it back, so we can pass it through the marketing managers, pass it back to the clients. So essentially going back to the essence of your question, what have I learned from big corporates? Well, actually, there are really interesting processes that allow you to scale your business at a small level that you can take away from those big corporates.
So I got 2 questions from your answer, but I'm going to go with the first one first. So since I'm going to give a lot of emphasis on Microsoft, the reason is in India here, Microsoft is one of the giants and everybody wants to find their way into Microsoft. Like once we are in Microsoft, rest of our life is secured. We are done. So I wanted to know, how hard was it for you to get into Microsoft, or what was your approach towards Microsoft?
Yeah, it's and I don't blame people, right? Microsoft is a fantastic organization to work for. I really enjoyed my time. You never know, I might still go back there one day. But in terms of getting into Microsoft, it's once you're in Microsoft, there is a lot of lateral movement in terms of job roles. So, my advice would be, even if there's a role at Microsoft that you don't necessarily want, once you're in the organization, it really opens you up to lateral movement across the organization. So, say for instance, you go in at a first line support, for Dynamics, for example. It's not really the role that you want, but once you're in there, you get trained up. You then have access to internal systems that allow you to see job vacancies. You start to get to know the managers or other people in the office, and there's a lot of lateral movement. So you can now move from customer service through to maybe sales, if that's actually what you wanted to do, or the other way around. So my advice would be, apply for a job, even if it's not the perfect job for you. My advice is, once you get in, start to look for lateral movement and get to know managers and get to know people in other teams, because they can make you aware of vacancies that are available that are maybe more suited to something that you would want.
So I'll definitely keep notes on that. Now I know the procedure, how to get into Microsoft. But yeah, I love my company, so I'm not thinking in that way. Moving on, the second question, which I have got is, you had a very good job, right? You were working with Hitachi, you were working with Microsoft, and then an idea came into your mind, why not start your own company or start your own agency? So how difficult was that decision to leave your job, which are paying you well and everything, your lifestyle is good, and then dive into this, starting your own business?
It's probably the toughest decision I've ever made. To be completely honest with you, it's a complete lifestyle change. The one thing I will say is, excuse me, the one thing I will say is that it's better to do it when you're younger, for several reasons, right? There are costs in your business costs in your personal life that are not yet on your head. So, if someone comes up to me and goes, "Oh, Rowan, I was 29 when I relaunched MIM. I was 25 when I originally started MIM whilst I was studying my postgrad." So, at 29, I had a mortgage. I was married, and we were starting to think about having children. And, that's a lot of costs, especially in the UK. Childcare is expensive, have a mortgage is expensive. So, you have all of those costs. I wish that I'd stuck with it when I didn't have those costs. So perhaps you're a student, you've got student accommodation, which is a little bit more affordable, or you're living at home, or you're living with friends. So you haven't got, a huge amount of costs on your head. For me, that would be the ideal time to start a business, because the risk is very, very low. Obviously, I was extremely well paid for my age. Working in central London, that comes with the territory, and working extremely hard, and working in the tech sector in particular for a big corporate, you do get paid very well. Still now, 2.5, almost 3 years on to the day, I don't get paid nearly the amount that I get paid that when I was working in London. But on the flip side, I've built a business. There's now, 10 of us that are in the business, and we've grown that from nothing. We have money in the bank, which is fantastic, and we have great clients, and we enjoy what we do. I think people think about the money very often, but actually I have a very, very balanced life in some respects, in that I can, if I want to, take a couple of hours off on a day to go and spend it with my child, or but then there are other days where I have to work till 10 o'clock at night, but that's my choice, and I think that's the difference between working in a big corporate. Sometimes it's not your choice to work late, but in my case, it quite often is.
There is one more question that came to my mind just now. So you have stated that you should start when you are young, right? But in your case, you have already worked with several corporates. You have a lot of experience, so you know what to do and when to do and what should be the right approach. But when it comes to students, right, we don't have a lot of corporate experiences right now. We do have ideas, but we don't have corporate experience. We don't know how the industry works. We don't know what the client wants, how to approach a client, how to sell the product. And there are n number of things which I can rant right now. So what will be your advice to those students who don't know how the industry works? So what will be your tip?
Yeah, and there is a very, very strong argument for saying go out into the industry, go and earn your stripes, and that's what I did with Microsoft and Hitachi, right? I took all the stuff that I was seeing on a daily basis and I thought, okay, that's good, that's not so good, right? I'm going to implement this and I'm going to do less of that, and yeah, absolutely, it absolutely helps. What I would say is, if you want to start your own business, it's very likely that that feeling will never change. You know, if you're an entrepreneur and you feel like you will start your own business. For me, I said I wanted to start my own business before I was 30. I was 29 when I did it, so that's fine. But what you have to weigh up is the risk, right? So, you know, if you have a good corporate job, very often people say, I'm really comfortable, I'm earning good money, I can see there is potentially some progression over the, next 15, 20 years. But at the end of the day, you're still working in that big corporate. You're not working for yourself. And that inner entrepreneur and inside yourself will always be going, oh, I wish I could start my own business. I wish I could start my, and that will never go away. Perhaps a good medium, Ritesh, is that, go and earn your stripes, go and earn some money, but have a side hustle. There's nothing wrong with having a side hustle. I think I read a study recently that said, in the UK, like 60% of people have a side hustle. Whether it makes you a lot of money or not is a different story. But, have a side hustle. Why not?
People have been doing a lot of cold DMs, lot of emails. You must be receiving it a lot on your daily life. A lot of emails from agencies or some other people. So if I have to reach you out, like suppose I have an agency, I want you as a client, right? So what should be the right approach to reach you out so that you get the interest and maybe we can close a deal in the future?
Sometimes when you send someone a message, it's not because they're not interested, right? It may be because they're just very busy at the moment that they see that message. So, when I say ask someone, if you don't get an answer, that's not a no necessarily. Right? They may just be very busy at the time that you message them. So, it's okay to send one or two follow-up messages to be like, hey, I haven't had a response from you. Just wanted to know if you're interested, because you will get a response eventually. So, good on you for chasing me up. So that's really, really useful to know that you need to chase people up until you get an answer. So I would highly recommend that. In terms of getting in touch with a founder of a business or a managing director of a business, depending on how big that business is, you may have what we call a gatekeeper between you and that business contact, usually a receptionist or a PA, something of that nature. And so that's a lot more difficult. But I would say, send a message, whether it's on LinkedIn or email, send a follow-up, and then give them a call. If someone calls me, my business.
That's more effective. If I find a third person between you and me, and if the third person can recommend me to you, then it will be more effective. Then I'll have your time and you might be interested in what this other person has to offer, right?
Absolutely. The strongest recommendation you can have, and this is whether you're selling to a customer or trying to reach someone, is word of mouth. Okay, so if I have someone that comes to me and says, Rowan, I've got my friend's daughter's in university, she's just coming out of university, do you think she can come and spend a week with you in the office and learn what you guys do? I wouldn't say no, because they can recommend them. If they go, oh, she's a really nice girl, she's really keen to learn, I can recommend her. There's no way that I would say no to that.
This is something that we will definitely learn from, because while approaching clients or while approaching your right recruiter, if suppose you want to get into some corporate or a company, so it's better to find that one person that can help you reach out to the recruiters, the HRs, and the person who is responsible for your hiring, and maybe get a recommendation from them. So it will obviously help you get the job easily, and it is the most efficient way. So amazing, Rowan. That is something that people will definitely take notes out of it. So moving on to the next question. Like, if you have to say, what is the best part and the worst part being a founder or being a managing director of a company?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And funnily enough, the answer is the same,
Okay.
which is very odd. So it's the people that you work with and look after. For me, seeing good feedback from a client about a particular member of the team is the best news, right? Because it's like you've taken something that was in your mind, you've grown a business, and then you're not the one that's delivering it, it's someone else that's delivering your methodology or your idea into other customers, and those customers are happy with it. But also, it's really good, that you choose your people very carefully. We've brought people into the business and they're doing really well, and that makes me feel good because we've got a really good team. It means we're doing a good job, and the customers are happy. So it's about, I'm feeling proud of that team and that team member for doing a really good job. On the flip side, it's very, very stressful, and you wear a lot of responsibility for looking after that team. So, when I said the answer is the same, it's not because, people cause trouble in the business. Absolutely not. I'm very, very lucky. We've got a very good team, but it's more the case of, I want this business to succeed because I feel personally responsible for the people that are in my business.
So, talking about responsibility, there's one more question that I want to ask now. So, obviously, your team is looking forward to you. You are the ones, and the higher authorities are the ones that they get motivated with, right? If they see the company is going good, the clients are coming in, you guys are making good money, so team gets motivated. But let's talk about the failures. If there is any failure in the company, and you have to express it to the team, okay, hey guys, we have failed, or we have to work more hard regarding that. So how difficult is that to deliver that message to the team? Or adding on to this question, like also, what is that biggest failure that turned out to be a blessing in disguise, if I have to say?
Yes. Okay. So your first question, how do we communicate um, failure within the business? The answer to that is very openly. So we actually had our quarterly team day on Wednesday, and as part of that, we had some motivational speakers come into the business. We had some fun and games and all that stuff. But one thing that we always do on every quarterly team day is we break out into pairs and we go, okay, in your pairs, I want you to come back to me with 3 things that we're doing really, really well in the business and 3 things that we can improve on in the business. And I write them down. I've got them in front of me as we speak. I can tell you there are, 15 things that we're not doing so well in the business, and there are 15 things that we're doing really well in the business. And so being in that forum where it's not aimed at anyone specifically, it's more of a general feedback session, allows us to have that conversation very openly and say, okay, this is working, this is something that we can improve on. And so, that's how we deal with it, right? And it's something that everyone knows. It's not personal. It's something that we're all working towards together.
Like, what is that one failure that turned out to be a blessing in disguise?
One failure that turned out to be a blessing in disguise for us was getting a big client very early on. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So quite often when you start your own business, you have to have an anchor client, what we call an anchor client. And this anchor client gives you enough revenue for you to be able to live, but also for you to be able to reinvest some of that into generating new business or hiring new staff or everything like that. But that one anchor client is usually someone you have a relationship with, a very good relationship with, whether it's an old company you used to work for, or someone or a family friend, or someone in your network. So that's fine. So we had that, which is great. But then we had another client come in who didn't know us, had no connection with us, but they were also a very big client. And I don't think we were ready for that. We didn't have the delivery team in place to be able to deliver it. We didn't have enough agency experience because I've never worked in an agency before, so it was new to me as well 3 years ago. But we didn't have that agency experience to understand, okay, what processes do we need to have in place? Okay, what happens when a client says this or does this? What happens when, we go on holiday, or, all these kinds of things that, thousands of different decisions that need to be made every month about a particular client, especially when they're a big client. And we ended up losing that client after, 6 months. But the opportunities that came from that were huge, because we had to take a serious look at ourselves, and we had to go, wow, okay, so we didn't astronomically fail with that client. The client just thought, okay, you guys are probably too small for us, we'll go somewhere else. But it allowed us to look retrospectively at what we'd done and be like, okay, we need to improve this, we need to improve that. And out of the ashes of that, burning client, came something fantastic, which we're now really, really succeeding with. We were looking at our clients on our team day on Wednesday, and all of the clients that we had on that list that are our existing clients are, A, they're really happy with us, and B, we're really happy with them. And that that having that feeling is phenomenal.
So moving on, this is some things for the candidates or the people who want to work with you in your company, basically. So apart from the skills, what are the things that you look forward to in a potential candidate for your company? What are the qualities that you look forward to in the other person if you're hiring them?
What you're talking about here is the non-tangibles. So the skills, soft skills essentially. And in my business in particular, our motto is family, fun, and one. So we
Can you please repeat it once again?
Yeah, family, fun, and one.
Family, fun, and one. Wow, this is something new.
Yes. So, we're a very family orientated business. The majority of the people in our business have kids, and relatively young kids. And so, we make sure that we incorporate that if they need to take time out, or they need to go to, a school play, or they need to drop their kids or pick their kids up, whatever it is, there's flexibility around that. The fun element is, we started this business to enjoy our work. And we make sure that where possible, we remind ourselves of that, or remind each other of that on a daily basis. But really, going back to your question, it's that last section. For me, when I look at a candidate, it's that one element. Can they become part of our one? Can they fit in with the team? And that requires a lot of trust, not necessarily charisma, because people can be charismatic in their own ways, but is there synergy with the rest of the team? When I meet someone like Ritesh, with yourself, if I meet someone, I know straight away I get a good vibe or a bad vibe. With you, it's really easy to talk to you, and I picked that up. But when I meet a candidate, usually within the first 30 seconds, you can make a decision about that person, whether you think they're going to be a good fit for your business or not. And so for us, it's the trust element that's really important.
I think I missed the chance. I don't have any kids, so maybe I cannot fulfill that family's part. But yeah, in the other situations, I can. So moving on to the next question. Like, it is something that usually you guys ask to us, but this time I'm going to ask it to you. Like, where do you see yourself and your company in the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the idea with us is to grow organically. Now, there are essentially two ways that companies can grow, right? You can either go and purchase another company, or you can grow inorganically, so get seed funding or get investors into your business, etc. Which is fantastic. It allows you to really scale your growth very, very quickly. But there are sacrifices you have to make to that, whether you're paying interest or whether you give away a share of your business, etc., etc. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just not the route that I wanted to go down. So the route that I'm going down is very much organic growth. It's a lot slower, or it can be a lot slower. It can be just as quick as inorganic growth, but generally it tends to be a lot more slow. And the idea is to, I don't know is my honest answer. I don't know where I want to be in 5 years, but I know right now our strategy is to grow organically, which means, we have no loans in the business. We don't owe anyone money. We have, our shareholders internally. No one outside of the business is a shareholder. And we don't really have to answer to anyone else. So, we can make our own decisions within the business. And so the idea is to continue growing, right? We're doing, in our first year, we grew a certain amount. Our next year we grew 10 times that amount. The next year we grew twice that amount. And this year we're on target to grow 2 times what we did last year, right? And as the business starts to grow, or as the business starts to scale, the amount of, the 10x or 5x or 2x, it starts to become smaller, but it's still a huge growth, right? It's essentially, logarithmic in that scale. So for us, the idea is to continue growing organically so that we can provide the best level of service to our customers. And that's really what it's all about.
So this is a hypothetical question that I want to ask you. So if you get a chance to have a dinner with someone, dead or alive, who will it be and why?
So I actually had this conversation with someone the other day, and it would be 3 people that I would have. So if you allow me 3 rather than 1, please.
You can go for it.
Okay, fine. So the first one is someone called Stephen Fry, who I'm sure you know. If you don't know who Stephen Fry is, he's I don't know whether he's an actor or a comedian first, or more of a philosopher, but he's a very, very interesting person. He is very, very intelligent, extremely intelligent, and very, very wise. The second person is Hugh Laurie. Now, Hugh Laurie, you may know as House MD, but before that, he's had a very, very long career working as a comedian. Again, studied with the likes of Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean, and Stephen Fry. They were actually all together in a program in the UK called Blackadder, which was, very, very groundbreaking comedy. But Hugh Laurie also is a fantastic blues singer, has his own blues album, and just generally a very, very intelligent person. So I would love the opportunity to have dinner with him. And the third one would be Nelson Mandela. Given my background, I think it would be extremely interesting for me to have a conversation. But also, I think it would be extremely interesting to have Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry interact with Nelson Mandela, because I think the conversations that they would have, even just to listen to, I think would be unbelievable. Right, because during the time that Nelson Mandela was incarcerated and freed, and then became president, so 1990 to 1995, Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry were in their prime as actors and comedians, and I wouldn't be surprised if they met each other at some point face to face during that time. So just to listen to a conversation between those 3. So not necessarily business related. The answer to your question, it's not Stephen Jobs or anyone like that, but just on a personal level, I think 3 very intelligent people that have been groundbreakers in their own way.
Listening to your answer, I won't be shocked. Like, looking at the advancement in artificial intelligence these days, maybe someone can create a conversation between these 2 people, and we'll get to know, like, okay, if they interacted in real life. So this is how the conversation would be. So I will not be shocked if you see something like that.
I'm going to ask ChatGPT after our call, Ritesh, and I will put a LinkedIn post about it, and I'll tag you in the LinkedIn post and say,
definitely,
from our conversation, this is the conversation that ChatGPT thinks would have happened between Nelson Mandela and Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie.
Yeah, that would be really amazing. I'm really curious to know what their conversation would look like. And I would also, if I ever get a chance, I would have a conversation between these 2 personalities, Albert Einstein and Leonardo da Vinci. I want to know what they will discuss in that situation. So these are some of the crazy things. Like, we can do experiments. We have the power of artificial intelligence right now. And maybe we can give some prompts to Mid-Journey to create a scenario like where these two peoples are discussing and how the world is looking at them. Well, this is really interesting. So moving on, since your name Rowan, it like in India, people are big fan of Rowan Atkinson. That Mr. Bean, he's a legend here. Like people look forward to him. They're crazy. So yeah, moving on to my next question. Like there must be a very stressful days, right? You must be stressed, you must be tired. So what are the ways you de-stress yourself? What are the things that you do?
Yeah, very, very good question. So, two things mainly. The first one is sport. So I like sports, playing sports mainly. Watching sports is very stressful for me. So playing sports is much less stressful. You get some good serotonin going, makes you feel positive. It's also a really good bonding opportunity with people that you're playing. So for me, I play tennis 3 times a week. That's the main thing for me. And I make sure afterwards that I hang around and have a drink with, a Diet Coke with some of my friends afterwards. So that's really fantastic. And then the other way is to make sure that I spend time with my family. So every Saturday is family time. We don't book anything. We don't plan anything. Saturday is family day from start to finish. So because I work late during the week, I sometimes miss my daughter's bedtime and bath time and story time, but Saturdays is family time.
It's very important to keep up with the relationships. And it's really challenging when you are into this startup journey, entrepreneurial journey, or if you are holding a very big position in some startups or something. It's very challenging to cope up with the relationships. So there is one more question that I want to ask on this, like how to manage your relationships, like talking about the college students or the young students that are right today in the world. So like most of them, they are like failing to come up with their relationships or cope up with their relationships. So what will be your tips how to do that, or if it is possible or not, whether you should focus on your dreams on the venture or you should make some exceptions?
I think there's always exceptions, right? But I think you need to make a decision. I was having this conversation with my cousin actually about 3 weeks ago, and she is based out in Malawi. She runs a very successful bed and breakfast and restaurant out there. But she's saying, Rowan, time's going by. I haven't found the person that I want to settle down with. And I said, well, in Malawi, I don't think there's a huge amount of opportunity for you to meet someone. So, you need to make that decision. And, whether you move abroad to somewhere where there's, perhaps more opportunity for you to meet someone, you can do that, right? And, and I was saying, by all means, you can do that. But everything has a cost. The time that I'm not spending with my daughter now, and that's why it's really important to make time for family right now, because the time that I'm not spending with my daughter, any time that I don't spend with my daughter right now, I will regret it later on. But for the success of the business, you have to come to some agreement. So that's why I said, okay, maybe during the week, 1 or 2 nights I can work late, but then on the weekend, Saturdays is family time. And the ultimatum I said to her, to my cousin, was you have to make a decision, right? Continue growing your B&B and your restaurant, and it's really successful, but you may end up alone, or go and find someone, find a new opportunity, go out, go to a place where you will be able to grow a relationship or build a relationship, but then you forego the opportunity to run that business. And these decisions shape people's lives. I'm not going to say which one I think is best. I don't think it matters, because everyone should make that decision for themselves. The main thing to remember is that every decision that you make has something that we call an opportunity cost, right? It's the opportunity cost of doing something means that you have to forego the opportunity to do something else.
So yeah, if you have to give a piece of advice to all the young entrepreneurs, all the young students who will watch this interview, what will be your advice to them?
Yeah, and I think it's very timely. And I think if you were to ask anyone that runs a business, they should give you the same advice as I'm about to give you, which is use technology to your advantage. right? You absolutely have to use technology to your advantage. Whether it's, AI or not doesn't really matter, but there is so much technology. There is technology that can do anything pretty much that you can think of. If it can't, there are substituent parts of technology that could do substituent parts of what you want it to do that you can plug together to do what you want it to do, right? So, we talk about the growth of tools that allow you to plug in different systems to each other. Um, and there is a big one that does it, but I'm not going to say their name because I'm not necessarily a fan of theirs. But there are technologies that we call middleware that can plug one technology into another, and then you have an endless flow or seamless flow of information, somewhat seamless flow of information. So essentially going back to your question, use technology to your advantage. If you see a system that can do this part of what you want to do in your mind, and there's another piece of technology that can do this in your mind, find a way to put them together to be able to bring to life exactly what you want, right? For us in our business, we've used Microsoft Office 365 very, very well. We use Power Automate, we use Task Planner, we use Teams, and we've linked all of those together. We've used SharePoint. We've linked all of those together to be able to communicate seamlessly from marketing manager to delivery and back. So we don't have to have briefing calls or a separate system. It's all integrated within our Office 365. So we've used technology within an inch of its life to be able to create better processes and give our customers a better service.
So since you must be reading headlines that a lot of people are getting laid off from their jobs and everything, right? So I want to ask you, what do you believe, what skills do you have that makes you irreplaceable?
And I don't think it's something that perhaps I can answer. I think it's something that you would have to ask other people, right? When you look at, I don't know if you know the concept of Johari's window, but Johari's window says that you have your known knowns that you know about yourself, things that you know about yourself openly. And there are your unknown knowns, so people that other people see in you, things that other people see in you. And I think that's probably a question you need to ask other people. About myself, I'm not the kind of person that would say, "Oh, I'm irreplaceable because of X, Y, Z." The only thing I will say is that every person is irreplaceable in some way because no one is the same, right? So, if someone, for some reason, if I got fired, and they brought someone else in, that person, wouldn't have exactly the same capabilities or knowledge or experience, or sentiment that I do, right? They may be stronger in other parts, but they may be lacking in other parts. So all of us in our own way are irreplaceable because you can't replace exactly the same person with another person. So that would be my answer to that.
So that was Rowan Williams of MIM who joined us today in this amazing conversation where we get a lot of insights and we get to know about Rowan, his experiences, and his vision. So thank you so much, Rowan, for appearing on this podcast, and looking forward to getting your visions published, and hopefully the audience will learn something of value. So thank you so much once again, and see you guys in the next episode.